Beyrouthi from FS Securities, a stockbroking firm on the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia. And today I'm going to show you, as every Monday I do, what happened last week, or actually the last few weeks, and what we expect to happen this week. And by the way, if you like the presentation, please give us some feedback so you know at least you like it or you dislike what we say. First of all, I'm going to show you the advances over decline ratio. You can see last week we've had more advances than declines, and following 2 weeks of declines exceeding the advances. However, with that last week where the advances were great, we can see that the volume over the last 15 days have actually been decreasing. Even though on Friday 32% of our stocks advanced and 25.6% declined, we can see that the previous 2 days we've had also some declines exceeding advances. I think the market at the moment is waiting for major announcements, expecting hopefully that the trade between China and the US will improve, at least in discussions, and at least some signals that things can move forward in a positive way. And of course, what's happening in the market around the world is that most reserve bank or central banks are reducing the interest rate, which obviously it's a very good thing for the banks as well as for the markets. In terms of what happened the last 2 weeks in America, you can see here that over the last 2 weeks combined, this is the column here in the middle, the market in the Dow was actually up by 5.1%, and the same thing with the Nasdaq and the S&P 500 by close enough to 5%. So we've had a good 2 weeks. Although last week was actually a very steady market, but when you combine the 2 weeks, we've had some very healthy improvement. In terms of the US dollar, over the last 2 weeks, there was 0.6% declines. What about the Australian dollar? The Australian dollar last week was 1.8%. However, over the last 2 weeks, it was down nearly 1%. Now, in terms of gold went up by nearly 2.7% in the last 2 weeks. However, last week on its own, it was very steady around the 1,345 US per ounce. Silver was up 2% over the last 2 weeks. Oil, 1.6% over the last 2 weeks, or continues to go lower last week as well. In terms of other commodities, if you want to learn about how to trade commodities, all you have to do is contact us. We'll help you out with this particular commodity strategies. Now, in terms of our market, this is in the middle here, that's the ASX 200, our gauge. You can see over the last 2 weeks we've had very good 2 weeks, 2.5% increase, coming mainly from last week, 1.7% last week. And by the way, our market gauge is made up to a greater extent by 2 major sectors, the financial and the materials. When both of these sectors are up, the market usually moves accordingly. When both of them are down substantially, of course the market reacts accordingly. Well, you can see here for the last 2 weeks, both sectors were up collectively. The financial was up 1.6% over 2 weeks, and the material was up by 4.8%. That tells you that the reason why BHP and Rio and Fortescue all going up is because the iron ore price in China has been going up, and it reached about $105 US, and that was actually the highest level for nearly 5 years. So a very good prospect for the materials, and of course for our economy, because these big companies bring a lot of tax for the coffers of the government. Oh, sorry, before I go, I want to tell you also that in terms of our market, you can see here on the right hand side, Rio was up 7.5%, BHP up 6.5%. That confirm what I said before. QBE had also a good week, nearly 5%, and Newcrest Mines also over the last 2 weeks went up by 10.7%. Most of it last week as well. Other companies that went down, Wesfarmers was down 5.3% last week. AMP down 1%, nearly 3% over 2 weeks. Anyway, if you want a copy of this presentation, all you have to do is call us, and I'll give you the details later on. Now, in terms of looking at charting, you can see that before Christmas, the Dow dropped quite considerably. That's the weekly chart. Recovered most of it since December, and then went down. And important thing is that the market dropped below the 200-day moving average. All the big institutions consider the 200 moving average as being very important gauge. It dropped, it left a big gap here, it filled the gap and then went back up. The question is where it's gonna go. At the moment is above the 50-day moving average. If it stays above it, we might most likely continue to go higher. However, I have some doubts myself that the market has been going up and down all the way, and it takes respite every now and then, and profit taking. Depends also on the price earning ratio. On our market, by the way, the price earning ratio reached 17, which tells us that our market at the moment is overpriced. However, it came back from 14 PE, and the market was very buoyant and very active, not only on the local side but also from overseas investors. Okay, if you look at our market now, we can see here we've had a tremendous increase from nearly 5,400 all the way to 6,560. That's nearly more than 10% rise since Christmas. The likelihood of taking a respite and taking back up, and by the way, we might see a bit of profit taking in the market in the next few weeks, so beware. To finish off, I want to give you my disclaimer because I don't know your financial circumstances, and everything I said today is only of general advice only. Before you take any action, please consult with us or with your professional advisor. And if you have any questions, there is a big question mark, and of course you've got my details. If you're ringing from overseas, you take the 0 out, put 61, that's the country code, and call 411-259526. If you want to write to me, it's george@fssecurities.com.au. Happy trading, and we'll talk to you again very shortly.